Are you ready? Or you guys want to just keep talking?
No, fire away.
You're the boss, man.
We are here, Spartan Up podcast in the Amy Barn, Pittsfield, where we do all our podcasts. We've got Dr. Johnny Waite. We've got the rewilding expert, Sephra. We don't know what rewilding means, but we'll get to that. And we've got Colonel Nye. And then myself, I don't have a nickname right now, but you guys like that open? Wasn't that open awesome?
Yeah, it kind of lost me on that open. So big black screen, nothing going on there.
Yeah,
No, you didn't see it? No, Sir Ran Fiennes.
Is it a headlamp I saw?
No, the headlamps were out. We were climbing Everest. It's dark, so you didn't see it. And yeah, you couldn't really see it. But no, I was climbing Everest with Sir Ran Fiennes, and well, we're gonna get into it. You're gonna love this interview. This guy's awesome. You know, he well, I can't tell you. You gotta watch this.
Okay, cool.
I'm excited.
I'm excited.
We're in the UK for the Spartan Up podcast, and I'm sat with what can only be described as a legend. He's been described as the world's greatest living explorer, Sir Ranulph Fiennes.
Hi, Del again. 12 years.
It's been a long time since you beat me in a mountain bike race.
I dispute that. You definitely beat me in the mountain bike race.
So it's going to continue this argument as to who won, but I'm pretty sure Ran beat me. Ran, how did you gain the title of the world's greatest living explorer?
The Guinness Book of Records in 1984 decided to categorise their sort of greatest in music and sport and one or two other strange categories, like who walked barefoot for 100 yards on red-hot coals. And I got it because at that time I had the greatest number of world records at exploration and was still alive.
What is an explorer? What does the word explorer mean to you?
To me it means you map a totally unknown area, which unfortunately means that after the advent of polar satellites, you couldn't. But we were 5 years before polar satellites. The area was 900 miles from the South African base on the perimeter, on the circumference of Antarctica, all the way to within 150 miles of the South Pole. It was totally unexplored. Nobody knew how high it was, whether the crevasse fields were vast, and that was the area we mapped. We were taught by Cambridge, British Antarctic Survey, how to make a map of this huge area bigger than France. So we produced the very first details and map of a huge area of Earth by terrestrial mapping. Nobody had been there before. And within 5 years, we wouldn't have been able to do it because it was done from satellite.
And what did it take to do an expedition like that?
Well, I suppose the Brits, being on a little tiny island, sort of want to get out. And they, for 300 years, tried to be first to get to the North Pole and to get further north than anyone else. And great numbers of them and their ships died in nasty circumstances and scurvy and icebergs and all that. More than any other nation, they had deaths, so they deserved to be first to the North Pole. But in 1910, an American, Admiral Peary, claimed to be first to the North Pole, so the Brits lost the North Pole. South Pole, which came later, they sent Scott, who did the first ever penetration. Captain Cook had discovered the edge of it and so on. And so they rather thought that, and Shackleton, that they should be first to the pole, which Shackleton very nearly was. But they were beaten by Norway. So my wife in 1972 decided that we ought to be the first to do both in the single journey without flying 1 metre of the 52,000 miles. So she, and gradually we got a group of international people from 9 countries who were prepared to work on this for 4 years with no pay. And eventually we got a ship, well, a nice strengthened ship. And by 1982, after 3 years of travel, we became the first people to cross both the Arctic and the Antarctic to reach both poles by surface travel. And nobody before or since has ever walked around, or rather travelled around the surface, not in the air, of Earth. More people have been on the moon. So we sort of didn't get first north, first south, but we did get first both.
And what makes somebody like yourself want to go and do something like that?
Well, in my case, my wife.
So who was the grittiest, you or her?
Oh, nobody was grittier than her. She wasn't very big, but she had very blue eyes, and I've seen big men fade, when she's putting them in their place.
And that's Ginny Fiennes, who was the first woman to ever win the Polar Medal, I believe.
Yep.
Fantastic accolade as well. And what does the word challenge mean to you?
It sort of isn't a challenge if either it's been done before by other human beings, or if there's different sorts of challenges. For instance, I didn't like heights, and eventually I thought I've reached the age of 60. I know people who can go to the edge of a building and look down and they're not frightened. So it's irrational. Vertigo is irrational. So I thought I'd confront it. And I had been successful with my only other phobia, which was spiders, but that took about 4 years in Arabia to get rid of. So I thought, we'll confront this, and obviously the place to confront it is the tallest mountain, which was Everest. I then learnt that 2 other people in the world had, since the Trans-Globe expedition, managed to cross both poles. They hadn't been, right the way around, but a Norwegian, of course, and a Belgian, Alain Hubert, were also wanting to complete it by climbing the highest mountain. But neither of them, like me, liked climbing. So I sort of watched them and I thought, well, if they don't try, I'm not going to try. But then I discovered that the Norwegian had sneakily had a go in 2004. So in 2005, with a black friend of mine from Swaziland, had a go from the Tibetan side. And then I failed within 300 metres of the top. I got a little heart attack in the night, 300 metres from the top.
You had a heart attack?
Yeah. And then on the 2008, I tried from the easy side, the Nepal side, because people said it was easier. And on the last night, I passed these 3 bodies. Rob Milne, who'd been buried 3 years, because there hadn't been much snow that year, so the bodies came out. Then we got up to a ledge where my Sherpa's father had reappeared after 8 years. And then on the buttress, there was a very famous Swiss climber being buried under rocks at that moment. He'd got to the top, no oxygen, got hypoxia on the way down. I think this had a bad effect mentally, so I wimped it and went down. But the next year, 2009, by which time I was the oldest Brit and the first old age pensioner to do it, I got up on the Nepal side and it was dead easy. But I had never found a drop. There were no drops. You see a white shoulder, but not a black void. So it wasn't a test of vertigo. So the whole point was sort of lost. Admittedly, I got to be first to do the 3 things, but the climbing instructor, who's a very bossy bloke, a very good instructor called Kenton Cool, he said, Ran, look, you don't have to go to Everest. There's a much cheaper way. I'll take you at weekends, teach you how to climb rock. And there's a thing called the Eiger. And if you go up that one, then you will deal with your vertigo. And so that was really how it came to be. Yeah.
And that was a fear you got over?
Yeah, it was a challenge, to answer your question. And it was a personal challenge, not a world record-breaking thing at all.
And what does success look like to you?
You never are successful. You're only as good as your last movie, as they say in the Spielberg world. And so you're not, and there's always, what you need to do is not to be the first up Everest, not the oldest up Everest, but the first old age pensioner up Everest, because then nobody can come along afterwards. They might be older, but they won't be the first old age pensioner. So you need, if you're wanting for firsts, you want to go for a niche market.
And what we'd like to do is ask you about what does grit mean to you?
Grit's a sort of American word for keeping at it in a rather unintelligent manner, sort of thing, like the infantry, And it's necessary sometimes if you find that you're really up against it. But grit normally goes with the boring sort of endurance rather than the extremely exciting endurance. What's
endurance?
Endurance is a more poetical word for grit, and it entails staying at it even after your wimpish voice in your head started suggesting that you don't carry on.
I hope you're not sitting still while you listen. If you are, you better get a burpee break in.
an individual who wants to get into big challenges needs to identify the challenge which they consider really worthwhile for them. And once they've identified that challenge, or even a mini challenge on the way to another series of challenges, they just stick at it. And when they find they can't do it, they go around the edge, like Mao Tse-tung, if you read his works, when you want to attack, you might let the enemy know by shouting retreat in the dark and then attack, and the other way around. You've got to, with risks, not take them on for the sake of taking them on. Try and avoid them. And if you want to be first and beat the Norwegians, the less risks you run into, the more likely you are to succeed.
Because you never seem to be afraid of a challenge. In fact, you don't seem to be afraid of much.
Well, I don't know. I'm definitely still afraid of heights. On the other side of the house here, we've got gutters, and in the autumn, I won't go up the ladder. I'll send Louise up the ladder, and I'll hold the bottom of the ladder. I really do not like heights at all. So yeah, I would say I'm frightened of them. And when we did the north face of the Eiger, I tried to wimp out after about 300 meters. I realized, I was going to be scared stiff, but by then, the charity, Marie Curie Cancer Care, had already got ITN, 10 o'clock news, were already filming it from Grindelwald, yeah, and so you couldn't drop out. But I definitely wished to drop out.
You mentioned the word fail earlier, but associated with having had a heart attack. How did you manage to come back from such that's an incredible challenge to your health.
I've never liked taking pills, if you can avoid pills, but on that particular occasion, my wife, Louise, with whom I had only had a honeymoon 2 months before in the base camp, because we'd only just got married. And so she then went, and she said, you will take, because I'd had a massive heart attack shortly before, you will take these pills. They're called glycerine trinitrate.
GTN.
Yeah, that's right. And I thought, well, to keep her quiet, I'll take them. So I did take them. And people, you say, when you get the big angina warning, and this is on the very last night, 300 meters from the top, in the dark, about midnight with a Sherpa, on the rope. It's quite steep at that point. And it started coming on, and I really panicked. It felt like an elephant was tearing the wire. You're done up with a wire after you've had bypasses. The wire felt like it was being torn apart. And I then thought, oh, Louise gave me those funny pills. But I couldn't remember, you've got so many pockets, and you've got a harness, you've got mitts, you've got a thing on your face. And as it got worse, I was trying to find these damn pills. I took off a mitt, and I eventually found them, by which time I was panicking. And I managed to unscrew the lid, and I took them, and I foamed like a dog, literally, and survived. And 5 hours later, we got back down to what they call the death camp, which is the last camp on that side of the mountain. And I think 2 days later, I got back down to the base camp, and the doctor in our group said, tell me exactly what happened, and I'll test this, that, and the other. Where's the bottle? And I gave him the bottle. He said, where's the pills? And I said, well, I took the pills. He said, how many pills do you take? And I said, 80. Well, it said 80 on the bottle, sort of thing. And I think the maximum that you're meant to take is 2.
2?
Yeah, I think so.
You thought, well, that'll work.
Well, it did.
Yeah. You don't seem to suffer from pain. You managed to take your own fingers off because you couldn't wait for the doctors, is that right?
Yeah, I took them off in there, actually. Well, on the other side then. It wasn't a question of not waiting for the doctors. It was because the doctors would not do the amputations. And we can show you some photographs if you want photographs, nice gory ones. So she said that every time I touched, for 5 months waiting for them to remove these, that's how much of dead stuff was sticking out. Every time you touch something, it's very painful. And she said I was getting irritable. And, what would I be like after another month, sort of thing. And so we discussed it. And because she had cattle and does their hooves, if you do it just beyond the nervy bit where it's dead, it doesn't hurt and shouldn't get germs. So anyway, from the village, I bought a micro saw and a Black & Decker bench, and the thumb took 2 days, and Ginny brought me tea and all that, and so we eventually cut them all off, and I couldn't get rid of them. I mean, I'd had them on for 60 years, and I just could not get rid of them, so I put them in the desk drawer.
Have you got any advice for the Spartan audience as to how to deal with obstacle immunity, how to get over obstacles in life? What have you learnt from all of your travels and expeditions that you could advise them?
Obstacles, we became good at not going over them, but going round them. So rather than impetuously thinking, boom, we have a cup of tea and work out how to go around them.
Thank you very much for your time, Ren.
Not at all, Del, and very good to see you again.
Wonderful
and thanks
to see
for
you.
all your instruction in those early days.
Of the mountain biking.
Yeah.
He still beat me.
What'd you think?
Incredible. That guy's
Amazing, real deal, right?
yeah.
Phenomenal
It's funny,
guy.
some stories. Like you think about, you don't become the world's greatest explorer without some unbelievable stories.
No, he's a story machine.
Yeah.
And humble and hilarious.
It's funny though. My
Amazing.
favorite story, and I got to get Marion to come over and tell this. She was off camera telling a story about while you were actually there. I'm going to switch out with you actually.
Yeah.
Marion, the camera woman?
Yeah. There's a good.
Our
there's a good
greatest
story.
explorer
Try to
of the
hold-
team.
So we're sorry if the camera no longer works. We got to lower that.
Good? No, that's
No,
good.
I-
That's good. It's lowered.
We got it.
All right.
Can you,
So Marion, you were telling us.
There you go.
that's good.
World's greatest explorer. You guys are at his office, and the 2 secretaries.
Yeah. So we got there. Dell and I were driving all over England, and first of all, Dell was like completely smitten. Can I say that?
I can
By
see
Sir
why.
Ran Fiennes?
Smitten
I can
for
see why.
those of us in the U.S. and guys, smitten is
She just
she liked.
Enamored.
She enamored. Yeah, that's
She was
right.
enamored.
Yeah.
All right.
So she was she was quite nervous
Grit.
about doing the interview. But we arrived there, and he had just done the ice bucket challenge, and
Can you talk into the mic?
oh god, this is harder than I thought.
Stand up straight right up next
She's
to
very
it.
nervous.
I am. I like it back there. What was I saying?
Ice
Like
bucket
the
challenge.
ice bucket.
And how he endured.
So now I'm gonna get the giggles.
Okay,
Two
you get-
secretaries.
Okay, so two
How-
secretaries.
Sephra will
All right.
do it. Go
How a
ahead.
man
All
who has explored
So-
both poles
Yeah,
was
yeah.
able to endure the
All right,
ice
so
bucket.
Ran Fiennes, right? No, we'll just say so. Ran Fiennes obviously is the greatest explorer. He has a very tight schedule and is doing a lot of different interviews. So Marion comes in, and the 2 secretaries seem to be kind of scrambling and
Right,
a little, I don't know, agitated. And
They're-
so
they're freaking out.
why were they
Right.
freaking
Pick it
out,
up
man?
from
Yeah. So he had just done the ice bucket challenge, and these 2 ladies were so nervous that they had both recorded it simultaneously, and one had recorded it on her iPhone and one on the iPad. And they, in their panic, they hit record, and then they were afraid they didn't hit it, so they hit stop. And they didn't want to tell Sir Ran Fiennes, the world's greatest living explorer, that they had forgotten to record the ice
What do you
bucket
think?
challenge.
What do you think he would have done? Does he like summon people out to the Arctic or what?
Right. Chop their fingers off. No.
There's no way that any man, especially the world's greatest explorer, and a guy who's been to both poles, was gonna
Dunk himself in ice water
How was he
again.
going to endure a second bucket of water over his head?
That's a good
Right.
point.
I mean,
that would be
that's asking somebody to go
that-
a little too far.
that's
So he-
beyond human.
When they did finally have the guts to tell him, he assumed they had actually recorded it, but they were just trying to trick him into having a
Doing it.
second bucket of
And
ice
you
on his
and
head.
you filmed it.
And I filmed it
filmed
for
it.
him, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
So it's
great.
my claim to fame.
Nice.
Well,
So at least I've filmed somebody
While
famous.
we have you here, how far down were his fingers cut?
About, I think it was above the knuckle
Oh, it's
here.
not so bad.
No. Actually, you see it. You can see it in the interview.
Cool.
There's a shot of that, yeah. You want to come back, Johnny?
come on, Johnny. All right.
He's multitasking.
So what else do we want to cover about this amazing explorer?
So what I thought was amazing was the
yeah.
whole thing about
Grit.
the overcoming obstacles.
Overcoming-
right?
or
And so
going
we're always
around
talking
them.
about we're always talking about like overcoming obstacles and obstacle immunity and persevering. And so this guy who's done amazing things, when we said, how do you overcome obstacles? He said, I don't. I stop and go around them.
The
So
intelligent.
I interviewed a special forces guy, and he said you want to push to a limit, right? Retreat, reevaluate, and then push a little further. Is that something they teach you in the military? And I think that's what he's saying.
Yes, and then I think that's probably just hopefully a little common sense as well, which is another theme We haven't really touched on that much, but some people have talked about it. But it's interesting when you talk about going around it from a military perspective. You get a squad of young, hard 19-year-old Marines or 19-year-old Rangers and say, go through that door. They're running through the door. You then go and get these older, wiser, Green Beret kind of guys and say, we got to get through the door. They will all figure out how to go around it or pay someone else to go open it for them. I mean, so, but the door is still open, right?
Right.
So a lot of that comes, I guess, with maturity and experience and age as
Right,
well.
goal is achieved. You don't have to
always
do it the hard way.
Right. You don't always have to bang your head against the wall to,
Right, you got to push the wall back, right? But I think it's great that he says true endurance is kind of getting past that first wimpish voice. So I think there has to be a way to differentiate between that wimpish voice that says, "Oh, my feet are cold," or maybe I'm going to lose some finger. I don't know. There's a delineating line between when something is life threatening, when your intuition is telling you, come back down. I mean, listen, this guy had a heart attack almost at the top of Nepal, and luckily his wife had given them those pills, right? And so, I don't know. It's hard to know where that line is because we've met so many characters here that are just. I mean, he's a superhuman. I mean, Fiennes lost cities of Arabia and. I don't know. It's
a lost breed, though.
I think everyone's a superhuman. I think it's just a matter of trusting yourself, pushing yourself, and
we talked about it with Global Rescue, how it sort of changes the idea of being out there when you know you have a little orange thing with a button you can push.
Right.
It's really a different challenge.
It is.
And what he did, people can't do anymore. I mean, when he was mapping places, there were no maps. You know?
Yeah.
What a delicious adventure.
What do you do with a map of Antarctica? where are you going once you get there? From one piece of ice to another. So I'm fascinated.
The penguin
by
villages.
Why do we need a map of Antarctica?
Maybe that's that wisdom we were talking about. Yeah.
But I doubt I'm using that map anytime soon.
I think it's a. It's an honor to get to hear this gentleman's
Without question,
opinion.
We actually need Johnny to come in and wrap this up.
We need Johnny to come in. Yeah, Johnny, come in. We'll wrap this up. But you know what? And I really think that's something else to be said. I think like his humbleness and his humility, and the way that he's joking about all of his accomplishments and everything else like that. I mean, that he just positions himself as such a leader. And for me, I'm so inspired. I was at the Explorers Club, and they were celebrating all these women explorers. And you hear these people's stories. You see the amazing feats that they've accomplished. And it goes back again to that positive attitude is so inspiring. I walked out of there saying like, I'm going on an expedition, right? You just want to. So when it's, yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you did some rough things. It's
I've gone on some expeditions.
12 feet of elevation back there where you're at.
and like a true Brit, his solution for everything was have a cup of tea and figure it out.
So we're gonna go have some tea.
Yeah,
some tea.
So grab a cup of tea, and while you're drinking it, go to SpartanUpPodcast.com. You're gonna find Colonel I's Interactive Corner, where you can let us know what you thought. You can find out more about this episode and others, and we'll see
what
you
expedition I'm on.
See you soon.
The Spartan Up podcast is brought to you by Spartan Race Incorporated. To find a race near you, visit Spartan.com. Interviews were conducted by Joe DeSena, with help in the UK from Del Grismo, video and audio production by Marion Abrams, with audio post-production by Aaron Moore. Thank you for listening to another epic story of success, and don't forget to visit SpartanUpPodcast.com to find videos of every episode along with notes and lessons.